What's up, everybody? Today I'm talking about a very special movie. 20 years ago today, X-Men, the first X-Men Bryan Singer movie, dropped in theaters. That is a long time. I was like less than 5 years old when this came out. That's crazy. And of course, I was not old enough to really remember it when I first watched it, but I've watched it many times since it came out. I rewatched it again today to refresh my memory and so I could give an accurate idea of if this movie does still hold up today. This is not going to be a review. I'm not going to be doing a full breakdown of the movie because, again, 20 years old. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. But I'm just going to talk about the things that I think still work well and some things that may not work as well. But ultimately, we're asking the question, does this movie still hold up? So let's get into it. First thing, let's talk about the story. Now, kind of like the original Spider-Man, in terms of scale, this movie was not that big and outrageous like the movies we have now. Again, this is a very simple story. Now, it does have a moment towards the end where it does get kind of like save the world. It's like a big thing that's about to happen, but it's still not to the scale that we'd have in like Avengers, for example, where it's like world-ending stuff. Like, this is not necessarily a world-ending thing. They are trying to save just the city of New York, but it still feels contained. It focuses mainly on these two groups of mutants, the X-Men and the Brotherhood of Mutants. One relationship that this movie focuses on heavily is the relationship between Rogue and Wolverine. These two run into each other at the beginning of the movie, and you see their journey as they both learn more about who they are. They learn more about the X-Men, Charles Xavier, what his school is all about. And you see them become kind of protective of each other, more so Wolverine being protective of Rogue. And this relationship between Rogue and Wolverine, I think, is truly the heart of the movie. I think that's really where you get a lot of the emotional stakes from, which I thought still worked really well. I liked Magneto's plan. I think Magneto's plan still holds up. The X-Men in general, all of the themes are still very relevant to today. It's all about human rights, discrimination, how people who are being oppressed, how should they react to this? Should they react in a way of peace? Is it about changing the system, or is it about like burning it all down and taking out everybody who's against you? That's kind of like the two sides that they're kind of going back and forth on. Charles Xavier's more like, no, we have to go into the government, we have to change laws, we have to be peaceful and empathetic and try and convince these people that mutants aren't bad. Whereas Magneto's like, no man, it's lost cause, they're out to get us, we need to take them down now, we need to make them like us so we don't have to deal with this anymore. And you understand why they both feel that way, especially Magneto, because in the beginning you see him being in the Holocaust as a child, seeing all of that destruction, all of that death, that really changes him, or it really affects him, right? And it makes him very jaded and like, I don't care what happens to these people. I'm sticking up for my people. You do you. And so I think that makes a lot of sense, and it still holds up very much today. And then there's the introduction of everybody at the school, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Storm, and then all the kids too. What's interesting too that I noticed is that you see a lot of people that are later recast in future movies in this franchise. Like, they reference Kitty. You see Kitty, but it's not Ellen Page. You see Pyro, and it's not the same guy who's in the next movie, right? Which I think is interesting. I mean, it happens, but it's just kind of interesting going back to see how much has changed in the first movie. And it's also interesting seeing some of these people who have gone on to do so many great things and see where they started. Like Hugh Jackman and Anna Paquin especially. This movie was really big for them, and it really was a launching point. I mean, some of them had stuff before this, but a lot of them had this franchise as like a big starting point for them. And so it's really interesting to see how all these people kind of started from this point. Next, let's talk about CGI and action. I actually think the CGI and action held up pretty well on this rewatch. Again, it's 20 years old, but I think they used CGI sparingly in this movie. Surprisingly, it's not a huge CGI fest, but there's not that many moments where it's like a fully CGI version of a character doing something. There's a few moments here and there, but a lot of it's more subtle than I remember, and I think that works really well. One thing especially that I think still looks really good is Wolverine's claws in this movie look really good, especially in the first scene where he reveals them, and they zoom in on his hand. You see his skin opening up as the claw comes out. That still looked really good. In some moments, I think the claws look better here than they did in future movies. Like, for example, X-Men Origins Wolverine, the claws looked really bad. But here, they still hold up. They still look like they're actual metal claws coming out of his hand. And I think in some aspects, they do actually have like a claw thing on his hand. But when it comes to CGI claws, I pretty much can't tell the difference. And also, some of the character designs changed. Like, Sabretooth looks completely different. I don't think they really explored him being Wolverine's brother in this one. But here, he's like a lot more like his comic book counterpart. He acts more like an animal. He doesn't have as much dialogue, but he is a force to be reckoned with, and you see him going head to head with Wolverine. I think those fights are really good. I also like the effects they use for Rogue when she uses her powers on somebody. The way the veins kind of pop up on people, it looks really good still. It really holds up. So overall, I would say that the effects definitely still hold up to today. In terms of fight scenes, there also is a lot of great fight choreography still. The action scenes are still pretty easy to follow. It's not super over the top in moments. It has some moments here and there where it really goes full out craziness, but overall, I feel like the fights are still really well done and the choreography is pretty solid still. And lastly, performances. I think the performances are still solid. The dialogue still works. A lot of the stuff talking about is still relevant to today, like I said. But I do also think there are some cheesy moments still, like the iconic line from Storm about frogs and lightning. That's there, yeah, but again, that's like one of two or three cheesy lines. There's really not that many cheesy lines in this as I expected. Maybe that's just me, but overall, I think the dialogue still works if you watch it today. The stuff they're talking about is still really relevant. Performance-wise, there's really not a bad performance in this movie. I think everybody knew exactly what movie they were in. They all gave it a very good balance of like sort of cheesiness, but also seriousness. Like you do understand the weight of what the mutants are going through, facing a world that is out to get them. That all is really good. There's that senator who was out to get them in the beginning, but you see him kind of turn after he's attacked by Magneto and turned into a mutant. I thought his point of view change worked really well too. And everybody, I think, did a good job too of planting seeds for future things towards the later end of this trilogy. Like, you see some hints at the scope of Jean's power. You also see the rivalry brewing between Cyclops and Wolverine. That is good too. And the relationship, again, between Rogue and Wolverine is a big thing that they set up here. Also, Rogue's relationship with Bobby, Iceman, is also set up here. All that stuff works really well. We have so many iconic performances in this movie. We have Ian McKellen as Magneto, awesome. Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier, Professor X, awesome. These two play off each other so well. You understand the relationship. You understand how their friendship kind of turned into them being enemies, and we do see that more later on in the franchise, but here I think they established it really well. Halle Berry is good as Storm. She doesn't get a lot to do in this movie, but she is still cool to see. James Marsden is good as Cyclops. One complaint people have about this Cyclops is that he kind of doesn't get as much credit. He doesn't get as much cool stuff to do in these movies as he does in like the comics or the cartoons. But here, I think he's still pretty cool. I mean, again, he does have moments where he gets whooped when he shouldn't get whooped, but I think James Marsden's performance is still pretty good. Famke Janssen is also great as Jean Grey. Again, they sort of plant the seeds to make you wonder how powerful she really is, but again, you don't get too much of it. You understand that she's great with medical stuff, but she's also a powerful mutant with psychic powers, and they also do a good job of establishing her relationship with Scott Summers. So overall, I would say the first X-Men movie still holds up today. It's still a really solid movie, still one of the best superhero movies I think of all time. It also is really important because this set the stage for the superhero movies we have today. This was like the first modern, I would say, superhero movie, like post Keaton Batman, post Blade. Like this, I think, was like the first movie to really kick off this era of superhero movies that we really have now. And it started this whole era of superhero movies. We have X-Men, Fantastic Four, Daredevil, Spider-Man. This whole era of superhero movies started here. They weren't all perfect, I know, but these movies became more grounded in the real world. I mean, there still was a lot of over-the-top stuff, but I think this is the moment where they really started to think about these superheroes in the context of the real world and like, what would these characters be dealing with in our world today? It kind of made that more relatable to us. So I think they did that really well, and this is a movie you should definitely check out if you have access to rentals, or if you have the DVD like I do, go watch it. It's definitely worth checking out. So what do you think of X-Men? Does it still hold up to you? Let me know down in the comments. Also, don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.